My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be fully alive. And in this episode with my dear friend, Dr. Tyler Schwanz, we talk about being alive physically, being healthy physically, being physically robust, and feeling fantastic because of the choices we're making regarding the sources and the preparation of our food. Cooking from scratch is a conversation. I thought I understood all the various ways to feed my body and to view food as fuel, but today my mind was blown as I really received some new insight that I never had heard before, even at my age, through my conversation with Tyler. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Listen in. Dr. Tyler Schwanz, my friend, my chiropractor, my mentor. It's good to have you back in the studio. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you.
I'm a chiropractor, been practicing for 12 going on 13 years, second generation. I am married, have a couple of kids. I love snowboarding. I love being active. And most of all, I love cooking from scratch.
Ooh, there's our 3 words for today. Well played.
Thank
cooking
you.
From scratch, or more specifically, cook from scratch. Why are those 3 words so important to you?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I don't even think that those 3 words are enough. Like, I could have said, I don't know, like know your food, or cook from scratch, of course, or, I don't know, like just respect the source, whatever it might be. That's the vibe that I want to give off with this episode, is like, just know your food, know where it comes from. And if you know where it comes from, this greater respect that you're going to have for the ingredients is going to make you want to play in the kitchen a little bit more. And as a cool side effect, you're going to be healthier because of it.
So we talk a lot about the physical dimension of people's lives, one of the 12 dimensions of people's lives. And you and I care a lot about that, and we are trying to be our best physical selves. And so let's talk about food. So a couple phrases I use, would love your quick response to them. Food is fuel. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, food is fuel, or you are what you eat, is another, aphorism that I feel like, yeah, we actually are. And the fact that we actually have this category of food called junk food, and then we also say we are what we eat, it's like, why would we create cells made of junk? Why would we say calories in, calories out? Doesn't matter the quality, doesn't matter what you spray on your food. Like, all this stuff matters greatly. And I think that those are things to live by.
So has this always been important to you?
That's a good question. No. As a child, I drank tons of Capri Suns. I drank tons of Squeezes.
Wait, isn't that juice?
Yeah, I mean, it's like basically Red 40. It's like nothing but that. Yeah. And that I think has steeled my resolve as an adult to be like, just because I did something as a kid and I didn't die doesn't mean that my kids should do the same exact thing, expecting to get the same exact results. And I think that the more you know, the bit greater responsibility you have to take better care of yourself. And once you see certain things and understand how inflammation works in your body and the reaction that sugars have on your nervous system, like, you have a greater responsibility for yourself and for your family.
Well, and my son teases me because my son Logan.
Which son?
My son Logan, who mostly teases. You know Logan well.
Yes.
But I like to use this idea that I want to eat as many foods on any given day that have just one ingredient. Your vegetables, your fruit, your meat.
One ingredient or less, right?
Oh, that's what the joke is. He's like, okay, remember everyone, gather around family, eat one ingredient or less, which it took me a second to realize less means, you're not eating.
Yes.
But obviously that's whole food, right? And that's real food. Typically, if it's one ingredient, it's real food. And I know for me, and I'll just share a little bit of my journey. Some people know that growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. And I'm not putting down my parents for this, but we ate a lot of food out of a box and out of a can. So I always thought that spinach was slimy and wet and weird. I always thought that carrots were soft because we would eat out of a can. And that's obviously easy, accessible food. But a lot of the foods I love now, I'm like, well, I didn't know Brussels sprouts taste like that. I didn't know that carrots could be so amazing. So I had to kind of relearn some of my eating habits as an adult because I just didn't realize food, when it's processed, it just not only tastes yucky, but it's bad for you. I'm going to pause the episode right now with Tyler and just invite you to share this episode, this conversation, with a friend who might need to really rethink their relationship with food. Now back to our conversation.
And I mean, the way you treat your food, the way you spice your food and season your food, like that adds a lot of value too. And most people, they're just not taught that. Like I know that Kelsey, my wife, she grew up hating salads. Well, her definition of salad was basically like iceberg lettuce put into a bowl with dressing from a bottle, put right on in there. And like that was your salad, was just lettuce with a little bit of dressing, maybe some cheese if you were lucky, if it was a church potluck that you were in the basement for and you had some fake bacon that you could put on there too. But these things that we are searching for, like when you, for example, I just talked about dressing, from a bottle. And one of the takeaways that I hope people get is that you don't have to buy salad dressing from the store ever again. Like the best salad dressings they have a little bit of oil, they have a little bit of acid, they have a little bit of sweets, they have a little bit of seasoning, and then you get to play with those variables and make your own version of whatever the salad dressing would be. It just, people have discovered this and kind of mastered this, and you don't have to go to the store and get a bottle of dressing. But when you buy something like salad dressing at the store, the amount of extra ingredients, to your point, like I want to eat as many foods that are only one ingredient or less every single day, like the number of ingredients sometimes exceed 20 ingredients, and the amount of sugar and the amount of extra things that you cannot even pronounce that are basically just compounds that have been created in a lab, that have been experimented with and experimented on rats' brains and humans' brains to see how they light up certain areas to make them more addictive and to make us want to have more and more and more and overindulge. If you make that stuff at home, like you can have all the best parts and you don't have all the addictive stuff and the stuff that has bad effects on your brain. And it's a win-win for everybody, I guess, except for salad dressing companies.
Well, and interestingly, I'm going to be a devil's advocate here because I'm sure some people are thinking, that sounds great, but isn't that going to cost twice as much at the grocery store then if you shop that way?
See, you would think. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things holding people back, because this episode isn't necessarily about eating organic. It's not necessarily about trying to buy the most expensive stuff. It's just about realizing that if you really like pickles are nothing more than cucumbers that are put in a little bit of brine. If you like yogurt's a little more than milk that has a little bit of bacterial culture added to it. Like bread, like all of these things.
Oh, let's talk about bread.
I'm not going to talk too much about bread.
We can talk about bread.
I do love bread. I do love baking bread, but I'm not going to make this episode about baking bread. But no, these things, they don't have to be more expensive. At a bare minimum, they may be exactly the same price, but of infinitely better quality. And for me, that's like you're coming out ahead. You don't have to pay a premium for an absolutely premium product compared to something that you would just buy at the store.
So cost is off the table. It could cost about the same or less. Some would say convenience.
So if you like convenience, it must mean that you just love landfills, because people that love convenience, they love plastic, they love single serve, they love throwaway containers, they love things that get the product to them and into their hands as quickly as possible. But we've been duped. Like, you don't need to have all of this plastic. And when you make stuff at home, you can make stuff in big quantities, you can make stuff in mass, and you can spread it out amongst your own containers. I was just chatting with somebody about my renewed love for making yogurt, and to be able to have like all of these mason jars of yogurt that then get reused. And guess what? If I do buy something in a glass jar at the store, I can reuse that for another yogurt jar or something else, So yeah, I think convenience robs us, and convenience makes us think that food is readily available and should be readily available to us regardless of season, regardless of time. Like, we can get oranges in Ohio that those don't grow here, and they only grow in certain areas of the world. They only grow during certain seasons, but our grocery store has them 24/7, 365 days a year. And we are led to believe that that is the normal. But if we, put convenience aside and reprioritize it in terms of health, in terms of sustainability, in terms of like, who is this serving most? Is it only serving me, or is it serving the farmers that have to, upend their livelihoods and whatever might be involved in that entire, whatever that's called, the process that brings the food from wherever it's coming from, and all of the trucks and all of the freight necessary to get it here before it spoils. Like, that massive effort, and the water it takes and the carbon emissions that it takes, like, just for convenience when we could just wait until summer and then get them from down the street. Like there are certain things that can be done, like canning, jarring, preserving, fermenting, pickling, things like this. If we did truly want to get these things when they are out of season, there are ancient, almost forgotten techniques that could be relearned that would allow us to have these finer things. And honestly, learning that stuff would give us a greater pride in the food that we intake and the food that we provide for our friends and for our family.
And obviously the 3 words are cook from scratch. So my guess is you enjoy actually the process, not only of eating healthy food, but cooking it and experimenting. I was thinking about our episode that we did together, Try Something New. And I was like, oh, this sounds just like Dr. Tyler. He's pulling in those same ideas that why not spice up your food, pun intended.
True.
Why not do different things and just kind of have fun in the kitchen? Do you cook regularly? Like, I'm just curious. Like, are you cooking on a nightly basis or every couple days? Or
so with my work schedule, I get to cook pretty much exclusively on the weekends.
Okay.
And it's not a burden for me at all. I love doing it. And my wife loves that I do it on the weekends. She takes care of it during the week, but then during the weekends, that's my expression of creativity. And so I will say this, like when you do cook from scratch, and I'll even take it to the next level, when you know where your food is coming from, even your meat, if you know the farm where it's come from, or maybe you harvested it yourself, like in the field. Maybe you have some deer in the freezer, some venison. Maybe you have other sort of wild game in the freezer. We had the opportunity this year to harvest a buffalo, a bison, American bison. And so that yielded about 260 pounds of meat for us in the freezer. So now instead of having to buy meat at the grocery store for the next year, we'll be able to shop right in our freezer for our breakfast sausage, for our ground beef, for our steaks, for all of that. But I say that to say that my boys, who are at the time that this is recording, they're 8 and 7, when they sit down and if they know we're eating deer meat, they call it, if we're eating deer meat or if we're eating bison, you better believe that they do not leave a trace of that on their plate. Not necessarily because they're different from any other little kid that when they get full or maybe they just lose interest, they're like, I'm done. And then they just push the plate away, which can be wasteful a lot of times when there's a ton of food left on there. Any parent can attest. But if we're eating those foods, they were with me when we harvested that buffalo. They know exactly where that came from. They know it's wasteful to not consume it, to not appreciate it, because that animal gave its life so that we could utilize it for feeding our family. So I think that respect, even with young kids, is a good thing to teach them, and it makes them less wasteful with the food.
You got to talk about bread.
Okay.
Well, a couple things come to mind. Obviously, this is a recent new hobby of yours, and so talk about your sourdough experience. And
yeah, so I'm in my sourdough era right now. No, it's less of an era, less of a phase. It's definitely more of a total lifestyle change. I've been doing it for 4 years now, so I think I can safely say that this is a habit that I am going to maintain. But yeah, so we don't necessarily have to buy bread anymore. Did you know that bread is like an infinite bread hack? Like you don't need anything other than bread to make more bread. And so it is like this ultimately sustainable food that you can use to nourish your body. It's been nourishing humans for thousands of years. Even when we didn't know what gluten intolerance was, it somehow was able to sustain the human race for, like I said, for thousands of years. So I love making bread. It's a great gift. It is a great way to feed my family. It is an expression of art. There's a lot of content out there. You can see how beautiful you can make a bread loaf. But bread is exactly why I wanted to talk about this, because people think that bread is too hard to do or they wouldn't be able to do it, and it's so easy. Like imagine like if everybody, like even just in our city, realized, hey, I don't have to buy bread anymore. Like all the plastic bread bags that would no longer have to be on the shelves. Like when you look at the average like bag of bread, like especially like stuff that isn't necessarily the best quality, it's going to have like 30 or 40 ingredients on there. And
the bread that you make has how many?
Flour, water, salt.
I didn't even know that. That's sourdough, right? That's the sourdough bread.
Yeah, that's sourdough. That's a non-enriched bread. So obviously you can make different breads that have butter and milk and eggs,
but still very few ingredients and all.
But bread at its heart is nothing more than flour, water, and salt. And so if you understand, like, I'm going to source my wheat berries from here, and I'm going to mill them myself, like we do. I'm very thankful that we do have a mill at our home to be able to mill our own flour and be able to utilize that. Like that's what cook from scratch means to me is to take something that cannot be consumed on its own. Like you can't consume wheat. It has no nutritional value for humans. Like flour, you can't just eat until it's cooked. But once it binds to water and it is heated, and to make it more palatable, instead of just turning it into gruel, if you add some yeast in there and it puts some air in there, like that's a very beautiful piece of art that you then get to eat. And it is very nutritional for you. That's what Cook from Scratch is all about, is taking those raw ingredients, knowing exactly why they're good and where they came from, respecting it. If it's an animal, respecting the life that was taken, that was given, however you want to view it, so that their life could give us life. That's what Cook from Scratch is for me.
I love it. Final word to our viewers and listeners who they're literally minds might be blown and be like, where do I start? And maybe give a final word of encouragement.
Sure. Yeah. Start somewhere. Start with bread. That could be your one thing that you choose to replace. And then if you want to get really adventurous, you could move on to yogurt. You could try your hand at fermenting things or pickling things. You could try your hand at, mixing your own spice mixes. Like that's a pretty easy one to do as well. You can make your own vinegars. Like there's very simple ways to make this stuff.
You said throw out your salad dressings.
Yeah, you can throw them all out. You never have to buy them ever again. But that'd be my final word, is maybe just start with bread and then keep that mentality going. Like, what other things could I just do myself and replace and allow me to get closer and closer to the source, for the purpose of health, for the purpose of sustainability, and for the purpose even of artistic expression and respect.
Wow. Thank you, Tyler. We'll look forward to our next conversation.
Right on.
Thanks, friends, for tuning in today to our episode of 3 Words Podcast. We appreciate you being on this journey with us, and we love that you stay connected to us. One additional way to be connected to DMB Coaching 3 Words Podcast is to actually go right to our website, dmbcoaching.com/subscribe. It's there where you'll find a digital monthly newsletter that is actually edited by our guest today in the studio, Dr. Tyler Schwanz. Every month, he puts together some great, new, fresh insights to be able to encourage you in a variety of dimensions of your life to become the very best version of yourself. So until we meet again in a couple of weeks, make it a great couple of weeks.